everyone, welcome to Sunny Day Discussions. I am Sunny Day. There is so much at any given moment coursing through my brain that it's hard to get my thoughts organized and pick a topic or topics to discuss in any given video. I have politics going into my ears all day long. Sometimes I take a break in the evenings, watch Netflix, read, but mostly it's politics all day. So again, like I said, it's hard. There's so much going on that it's hard to decide what to go on about. I never had any interest really in politics. I was super excited to vote for the first Black American president. I only registered to vote against Bush in his second run. But I never really followed along. You know, I had an idea. I was always politically active in equal rights, you know, no prejudices, women's power, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until the Trump administration, specifically the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. I remembered from when I was little the Clarence Thomas allegations, and even then believing Anita Hill. And so when Kavanaugh came into the picture, it really piqued my interest, and ever since I've been obsessed. So let's round it back down out to Trump. But first I want to go over the mass shootings that have occurred since I last spoke about it. So on the 9th there was 2, and this is in June obviously. The 10th there was 3. On the 11th there was 6. On the 12th there was 1. And that's all. Not that that's a little, but that's all. Now I want to talk about Trump's indictments, the federal indictments he's facing currently. He has been charged with 37 criminal counts, and he has been charged under the Espionage Act, and that is for the unlawful retention of classified documents. There was a particular passage in the indictment that I kind of just made me go, huh? And that was the papers that Trump had in the boxes that he stored in non-secure places all over his compound. It says, quote, information regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries, United States nuclear programs, potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. The unauthorized disclosure of these classified documents could put at risk the national security of the United States, foreign relations, the safety of the United States military, and human sources, and the continued viability of sensitive intelligence collection methods. That's a lot. That's not good. I kind of knew that it was something along those lines, but I didn't know the extent. And you know, you got to take what the media says with a grain of salt because, as I've said before, they try to push one way or the other or play both sides. So it's not always necessarily accurate. So I've heard a lot of talk about the Presidential Records Act and Trump claiming that because of the Presidential Records Act, he can, you know, unclassified documents with his mind and all that kind of stuff. Well, the Presidential Records Act passed in 1978, pretty much thanks to Nixon, but in it states that any records created or received by the president as part of his constitutional, statutory, or ceremonial duties are the property of the U.S. government and will be managed by NARA, the National Archives, at the end of the administration. So even if he had declassified or none of the documents were classified, he had no right to them. None. So the whole talk about, well, he declassified them, it's all okay, he declassified them, he had that prerogative. It doesn't matter. He did not have a right to them. Also, he can't just say, poof, declassified. There is a process. Because if he has his hands on something, such as some of the things he did have his hands on, and just decided without telling anybody that these are declassified, and then just starts broadcasting them through social media or wherever, he's really putting, national security in a bind, because they have no way to prepare, retaliate, make sure we're safe in regards to that. So there is a process, an approval process that he didn't go through. Now, obviously, there needs to be a better system for presidential records, governmental records, because almost every president walks away with some records. But there's also a lot of discussion about, well, Biden did it, why isn't he in jail? But the thing is that it's completely different. Kind of like with Pence. By all means, investigate. Make sure it was done unintentionally. And if it wasn't, prosecute if you can. But when Biden and Pence found classified documents, they immediately called the FBI and turned them over. The thing with Trump is that he spent over a year claiming that he had every right to him. He didn't have any, and fighting every step of the way. Then he actively kept secrets from his lawyers, causing his lawyers to end up committing crimes unintentionally. That's why they had to testify against him. It's the crime fraud exception. So there's a huge difference with what happened. And then when he said he did turn over everything, NARA was like, we need more. There's more. And so the search warrant was issued, and sure enough, there was more. And they're still not sure if they have everything. So that's a big problem. Now, there is a double standard within law, but it's not the way the conservatives are trying to spin it. The double standard in law is if you're wealthy and have money and are of pale complexion, you get away with quite a bit more than, say, if you're poor and have a darker complexion. Or if you're any sort of minority or marginalized community, you don't get away with nearly as much. So that's where the double-tiered justice system is. And there's multiple tiers. It's not just rich and poor. It depends on where you're at. But I'm going off on a tangent. Okay, so that was pretty much all I wanted to talk about with his indictment in this video, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming out. There's going to be some violence. There's already been threats that people need to die by his supporters, by congressmen that say we need to have a war. And they're saying it's all just a miscarriage of justice. But if Biden had done the same thing, they would be in 100% support of this. I mean, Biden didn't do nearly as much, and they're still like, prosecute, So it's ridiculous. But the main point I wanted to bring up in this video and talk about is the book bans that have been occurring. Now, the two main regimes that were known, at least known to me, for banning books was Nazi Germany and the apartheid regime of South Africa. So the books that have been banned have been topics that conservatives feel are inappropriate. Things like LGBTQ+, slut-shaming, rape, racism, suicide and depression, totalitarianism and fascism, mental health, transgender issues, police brutality towards marginalized communities, primarily the Black community, Sexuality, trauma and grief post 9/11, school shootings, civil rights, slavery. Now, when you're banning all of those books, you're banning resources that can help kids figure out what's going on with them. Like when you ban books about sexual assault, there are over 1 million kids a year who experience sexual assault or rape. And they're too ashamed to come forward and talk about it, press charges, get help, therapy, because our society has basically been like, what did you do to deserve it? Was your skirt too short? And it's bullshit. So they don't come forward. But if they have access to literature that says they're not alone, that this happens and it's not their fault, it might save a life. It might help their mental health. And so the whole premise of banning these books for the children, as we clutch our pearls, it's not true. It's just because they don't want them to know about those things. There's so many things. 1 in 2 Black kids experience racism. 1 in 2. And so if they can read about history and see what it's about, what's behind it, what's the cause of racism, they can maybe cope with it a little bit better. If they can talk about it, if they can identify with somebody who has experienced that without having to verbally communicate with it, it could help. And it's just a small, loud minority that is into banning books. According to a Fox News poll, 70% of all voters are opposed to banning books. 70%. So it is just a very small minority that is holding their, or pushing their religious beliefs and morality on everybody else, everyone around them. They're saying if it's something I disapprove of, then nobody can read it. And the thing is that that's not okay. That's silencing personal expression. It's a violation of the First Amendment, in my opinion. But it's hard to keep my thoughts straight. There's a Parental Rights and Education Act of Florida, and that controls access to information and educational materials. Mostly it led schools to remove LGBTQ plus content. And if a student got a hold of a book that was considered not within those bounds, it's felony charges. And it's so vaguely worded, and they're leaving it up to the librarians to figure out what might fall into that category. So because of the charges being or the punishments being so extreme and the wording so vague, it's leading to a lot of books unnecessarily being pulled from the shelves. Now, some of the books that have been banned in Florida are books by Ernest Hemingway, Jack London, Helen Keller. And that's interesting to me because those are also authors that were banned in Nazi Germany. They got their books burned and banned. Now, why are conservatives so obsessed with banning books? And I think, in my opinion, it's because their fear of indoctrination is what they say, is because that's what they're doing, is they're indoctrinating. It's the whole gaslighting thing. When you give kids access, and people, not just kids, anybody, access to a variety of stories, of viewpoints, of thought processes, then they come up with their own educated viewpoints. And usually it's in direct opposition of what Christian conservatives want. So by banning these books and only allowing specific literature to be read that support their viewpoints and their ideologies, that is indoctrination. Giving kids the freedom to read what they want and come to their own conclusions, that's freedom. Giving kids a limited set of books to read that tell them how to think, that's indoctrination. And without indoctrination, the power of conservatives and the Christian conservatives, the evangelicals, the people who want this to be a theocracy, they lose power because they're questioned. And people know it's wrong. They know it's wrong to marginalize a community because they're different. So by keeping people ignorant, they are keeping them malleable to shaping them into what they want them to be. People who are educated and who read a lot tend to be critical thinkers. So when they're told something, their thought process is, but why? And what happens if? Instead of just, oh yeah, that makes sense. So throughout history, the justification for banning books is to protect our youth from corruptive influences. It depends on what your definition of a corruptive influence is. To me, touting Christianity is the only way to go, that is a corrupt influence. So it's all perspective. That's why you need to give people options and allow them to explore and to figure things out. Now, it's not just conservatives who have banned books. Liberals have banned, like, Dr. Seuss because of the racist tendencies in that. But banning books anyway, no matter what party, is wrong. There's 32 states that have banned some books, but the concentration is in Florida, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah. And those states are red, obviously, but it's limiting what people can learn about and read about, which tends to breed bigotry and fear. And that's just their politics. That's conservatives for you. They do everything they can to get you scared so that you react. Because that's the way they get their way. That's the way they get people to vote. So no books should be banned. If they're of a pornographic nature, put them in a place where it's only accessible by adults. You know there's no pornographic books in schools. So it's a form of control. Control by ignorance and control by indoctrination. And again, you can pretty much guarantee that if conservatives are saying Democrats are indoctrinating, that's exactly what they're doing. So that's all I'm going to say for today. It's been a long video. Vote, no matter how big, small, insignificant, your vote counts, and read. Find a list of all the banned books and read. Read them. Figure out why conservatives are trying to ban them. And you'll see that it's because they don't want you to experience different viewpoints. So thank you. I've noticed a lot of you watch the videos. not a lot of subscribers, so I'm asking you to subscribe. It helps with the algorithm. I'll get it put out there more. Just help me out. Anyway, thank you, and I will see you next time.